Thank you. Just wanted to welcome everyone and thank you so much for being here today. It's amazing to see how many of you are here, and thank you for already engaging in the chat. This is our third webinar since we started the network. So if I haven't seen some of you before today, my name is Jelena Matic. I am a senior educational developer at Nottingham Trent University and also a creator of this network. So we started a network in November with a very just kind of an idea to find people who want to talk about coaching. And today we're here with 170 members in the network and third webinar that's been attended by more than 50 people. And we are very happy that we had this response from all of you and everyone in the network who is doing things, leading development groups, contributing by sharing their experience and knowledge through webinars and other ways. So thank you, everyone. I'm very excited for today's session. I met Hannah very early at the start of this network, and Hannah very quickly became an active member of the network by contributing, sharing, starting the development group, which some of you I'm sure are members of. If you're not and you're interested, I'm sure Hannah will share the details later. But just to introduce Hannah a little bit, I'm sure she will tell you more about herself, but I want to thank her for today. And Hannah is an educational developer from the University of Arts London. She's an autistic academic who speaks, writes and facilitates training about the pedagogy of employability, leadership, autistic experiences and intersectional across all three. She is currently undertaking a coaching qualifications, and her focus is on developing neurodiversity-affirming approaches to supporting others, which is what we're going to be listening about today. So please do engage as much as possible, ask questions. I'm sure Hannah will tell you that the questions are welcome throughout. I will soon enable mics, so if you want to speak rather than write in a chat, just raise your hand and Hannah or I will invite you to speak. Enough from me. Thank you. Enjoy the session. And Hannah, over to you.
I love it. You can tell I'm so used to just running my own sessions with no lovely introductions like that. Great. Thank you so much, Jelena. And yeah, I think huge appreciation to you for setting up the network as well, which is amazing. There's so much interest in it already. So to start, just a bit of an overview of what we're going to cover, but I'm going to show you very specifically what we're going to kind of home in on today. So we're going to talk a little bit around neurodivergence and disability, the relationship between those two things. I'm going to introduce to you my neuro-affirming framework. Sometimes I think I'm dressing it up to sound more exciting than it is, but yet the feedback I'm kind of getting is quite positive. So hopefully it will feel like a quite useful framework for you to use. Within that, we're going to focus today really on the practical considerations that are sort of kind of emerging from the framework. So I've got a whole other kind of job and a bit of work to do on the theoretical considerations, which is looking at, let's say, what theories and frameworks you might use within coaching neurodivergent people. But actually, to be honest, if you don't get those practical considerations right from the beginning, it almost kind of doesn't matter in a way what brilliantly neuro-affirming theory you're using, because you'll potentially have created barriers to clients and individuals kind of accessing the learning from working through those frameworks or tools or whatever it might be. So the focus today will be really on the practical. And then I'll just signpost some resources. It wouldn't be a session if you didn't signpost to resources at the end, right? So where am I going? I'm flicking through the wrong thing here. Yeah, just to remind you again, chat function, please do use. If anybody's not familiar with Teams, I've kind of circled the main buttons. Hopefully your Teams look somewhat similar to that screen grab. The chat function, please do use throughout, and I'm keeping track of it. If you want to come on mic, and if you're able to come on video, like I said, that's really helpful. But if you want to come on mic, if you could put your hand up, because I find that most helpful in terms of knowing what's going on in the room. There's also the little react button at the top of Teams. It's got a little smiley face on it. When you're speaking into the void in particularly a large session, it can be quite helpful to know sometimes if something's resonating with people. So I really do like when people do thumbs up or whatever it might be. I don't think there's a cranky face one you can do. Hopefully you wouldn't have the need to do that. Look, I'm getting some great reactions already. Yeah, to be honest, that's just really helpful to me. I've spent my whole life asking people, do you know what I mean? Or does that make sense? Which I will probably do in this session as well. And that comes from a long history of not actually being understood very well. So those little reactions throughout can be really, really useful as well. I noticed a hand went up there. I'm assuming, like in my last session, it was maybe just the looking for the reactions button and the hand went up instead. So I won't go to it, but please do put your hand back up again if you want to ask a question. So yeah, hopefully that's giving everybody a good sense of how to engage. And like I said, really happy for questions throughout. About me, this session is not about me, but I am in the session. So obviously I am leading the session, but it's so much of this kind of work and this thinking, you know, is so influenced by who I am and my own identity. So it makes sense to sort of frame my own positionality, but also it's sort of a caveat as well. I am going to bring my own lived experience into the session a lot, but I just want to remind you that I am only one autistic person, for example. So I'm not speaking on behalf of every neurodivergent person out there or every disabled person out there, but through using my examples from my own lived experience, I'm hoping that I'm sort of grounding some of what I'm saying in practical kind of illustrations. So hopefully it won't feel like it's the Hannah show, and yet I want to share as generously as I can to help people maybe connect dots or develop deeper understanding around some challenges that neurodivergent people might face. So what can I say out of this? So I think we have somebody's mic on, maybe. Let me just check. Yeah, we've got a mic on somewhere and it sounds like it's also a delay issue.
I think I managed, don't worry.
Thank you. I'm also so not used to having somebody supporting me in session. So yeah, no, I'll keep forgetting that you're there and you can actually help out with things. Key things I maybe to say, I'm an advanced HE senior fellow. I've got an MA in performance making from Goldsmiths and an MA in academic practice from UAL. I lead a team of 7 to 9. We've got a couple of people on parental leave at the moment. Academics and careers professionals. My role sits within careers and employability at UAL. I'm also autistic, ADHD, I have dyscalculia and a chronic pain condition. And like I said, I will bring some of those experiences into the session, but I want you to extrapolate out from those, not just say, oh, because oh, we got some more interruption. Got somebody joining, just figuring out Teams, I think. Okay, I think it's sorted now. So yeah, extrapolate out. Please don't think because that one autistic person said this thing to me, that must be the way it is for every autistic person, because it's definitely not the case. I feel like I always need to start with this framing around neurodivergence and disability. I'm slightly laughing to myself because one person in the room, we've literally just written a book chapter focusing on some of this stuff. So that person will know exactly what I'm talking about. But very often you will see, for example, our staff network is called the Disabled and Neurodivergent Staff Network within UAL. You'll often see somebody who is disabled and or neurodivergent, that written as a sentence. To me, my experience, that doesn't make a huge amount of sense in my experience. I am most definitely disabled. I'm disabled in the context of the social model of disability rather than the medical model. So I'm disabled by barriers kind of in society and in my environment. And for me, neurodivergence is like a subset of disability. It's a form of disability or a certain, I don't love the word type, but a type of disability. And then within being neurodivergent, I am specifically, like I said, autistic, ADHD, and have dyscalculia. The other rationale for me, or the anti-rational in a way of why you wouldn't separate out neurodivergence from disability in kind of conversation when you're thinking about attending to different needs, is that a huge percentage of neurodivergent people also have co-occurring health conditions. So again, for me, it's a chronic pain condition. So if you weren't, if you didn't consider yourself disabled because you're neurodivergent, it's quite likely that you may have another aspect of your experience that sort of fits you or, situates you as a disabled person. And I just feel like it's quite important to frame some of this early on. And also just as a reminder, I suppose, in a way, that for me, being neurodivergent is an invisible disability. I don't actually love the term invisible, because I think if you're really paying attention, it's there. So it's not actually that invisible. It's just a bit unseen in a way. People aren't really looking for it. But I can also show up today on a Friday, run a 2-hour session for 57 people. But the invisible part is you haven't seen all of the prep I've had to do to build up to this point. You're not going to see actually the implications or the impact of this session. I'm going to really enjoy it, but it's really going to wipe me. So there's probably going to be a couple of hours in bed before I have to go pick up my daughter after this session. I've also been predominantly housebound since about 2022. You don't know that because you're meeting me online. So lots of people will see me in these spaces and in these contexts and really not understand what part of my experience is related to being disabled. But my every single moment of every single day, that is my experience. And I think it's really important to frame that. Not every neurodivergent person will identify themselves as disabled, and that's okay too. But I think we do need to get a little bit clear about maybe how, these questions around where do these things relate? How do they fit together? And Ruth, I'm glad that connection between neurodivergence and disability is helpful, and glad that it resonates as well. Great. So, so Sarah, you're saying our disability working group has just incorporated the neurodivergent working group. Interesting. Yeah, our members in the neurodivergent group specifically wanted it separating out, either because they don't consider themselves disabled or because they don't want neurodivergent matters to disappear. Yeah, it's really, really complicated. And that is partly why I set out at the very beginning my position on it and the context from which I'm coming, because there will be variations across those kind of perceptions and experiences. I won't get into the Equality Act, but if you're neurodivergent, it can be covered by the Equality Act. So it's also worth thinking about the relationship to the law and the legal frameworks as well. Absolutely not an expert on that, though. So a neuro-affirming framework, does anybody want to either come on mic, or you can put in the chat how do you define neuro-affirming? Or if you don't know, have a go at what the word neuro-affirming might mean. And I'll give you all a minute to have a think about that.
Hi, Hannah. Oh, sorry, I'll break the silence.
I love it.
Thank you. Is it about avoiding putting barriers in place, and more than that, making sure that all ways and forms of thinking are welcomed?
Yeah, love that. Yeah, for me, it is about embracing. So it actually moves beyond, you'll often hear, I can't even keep up, but is it Autism Awareness Month? Is it Acceptance Month? I don't even know. But for me, it's about moving beyond understanding, awareness, and acceptance to actually a strengths-based model to embracing those differences. So I think you really kind of hit the nail on the head there. It is about, actually feeling really positive about these differences. So thank you. I really appreciate you coming on, Mike. Emma, do you want to come in as well? And then I'll pick up on some of the things coming up in the chat.
I'm actually struggling to define what I think it means to me, but I have recently connected with a neuro-affirming coach and hope to start with them soon. And I've had coaching, I am a coach, but what I need is something that allows me to embrace myself in my fullest. I've had a lot of denial around my neurodivergence and want a space where I absolutely show up as my full self. So that's my personal definition.
Yeah, and that word embrace again. And I think that's lovely. And that's how I position my coaching as well, is that it's neuro-affirming. I'm a little unclear about being an ADHD coach, for example, or an autism coach. I'm never, that's not how I would frame what I do. But neuro-affirming in that I embrace whatever difference it is and however that might show up for an individual. And then often work to explore, like, you know, how can we start to lean into those differences actually, and how can we not overlook the challenges, but how can we really start to own those and make them work for us as well, rather than feeling like there's something we have to overcome. Thank you, Emma. So I'm going to just pick up on some things in the chat. So recognizing and celebrating neurodiversity. Yeah, I love the emphasis on celebrating. A strengths-based approach, yeah, underpinned by the social model, exactly. Taking account of our differences and allowing people to be themselves, not masking. Yeah, please, can we have less masking, less need for masking in the world? That you're framing aspects positively rather than as deficits in comparison to neurotypical. Yeah, that's lovely, actually. It's a really nice comment. Alison, affirming of and celebrating brain differences, appreciating strengths and recognizing where there might be barriers, and so being flexible enough to adapt accordingly. I think I was going to make this point elsewhere, but I'll make it now just because it's come up, and I may forget and then make it again later. But I often think it's worth pointing out that neuro in neuro-affirming neurodiversity refers to the nervous system or the nerves. And fundamentally, my experience of being neurodivergent doesn't exist just in my brain. It's a whole body experience. So I often will say to people, oh, it's not really just a difference in my brain. So that might resonate with some people or be worth thinking about if it's something you hadn't thought about before. Leslie, validating how we all work uniquely. Great. Niels, I wonder if affirming here means acknowledging, being aware of, related to attitude, or whether it extends also into practice that make it accessible to people with forms of neurodiversity. Yeah, and I'd go even further and say not just makes it accessible, but warmly welcomes and embraces those differences as well. Yeah, Leanne, I've heard of this. So in Dubai, they're using the term people with determination rather than disability. Personally, I have no issue with being disabled because disability should be a morally neutral term. It's just, it's not societally. So I am disabled. Like, there shouldn't be any shame. That's just a statement of, like, I have black hair. Well, actually, sorry, it's quite graying now. But at one point, I had very black hair. It just shouldn't be a thing. But I've had to overcome a lot of internalized ableism actually to get to the point where I can just say I am disabled and whatever the rest of the sentence might be. So yeah, there's loads of different approaches to, like, how do we frame this, but I'm quite comfortable personally for me with I'm disabled. Respecting people, yeah, understanding, embracing and affirming individuals with neurodivergence. Yeah, and it's also worth maybe a little note on language as well. A lot of people will prefer, but it's always worth checking, to use identity first language rather than person first language. So I'm not a person with autism. I am an autistic person because autism it's like my whole identity, not in a bad way, but I would just be a different person if I wasn't autistic. Positive recognition, acknowledging neurodiversity and working with neurodivergent and neurotypical, I hate the term, people to create community and equitable opportunity for all, not pathologizing, yes please. Trying to make neurodivergent people normal, yeah, I don't need to feel normal, thanks very much. I wouldn't even know what it was. Yes, practices and approaches that recognize and respect and validate individuals with neurodivergent persons. So again, just neurodivergent people in my world would be fine to say there. good. We're getting some goods. Any chance you could elaborate on what neurotypical means, deliberate emphasis? It strikes me that there's such great variation in how we process inputs and share inputs. Yeah, what is typical? Oh, Niels, can I do that without taking up the whole session? Okay, I will try and really quickly talk a little bit about language. So neurodiverse means everybody. I know that's not what you're asking, Niels, but it feels like I have to dial back. Neurodiverse means everybody, people who are neurotypical and neurodivergent. Typical, it's actually, for me, it's more about dominant norms, but neurodominant norms is slightly more of a mouthful, isn't it? So I think people have just recognized that there are dominant norms within society, and they're dominant because the majority of people fit within the parameters of whatever those norms embrace. And then there are those of us who diverge from those norms. Some people hate neurodivergent and say neurodistinct. So that's like a whole other thing again. So I think the typical is to encompass, again, a wide range of experiences, but experiences that actually can be somewhat broadly shared by the majority. I don't know if that fully makes sense, Niels, but I know that I've written about it. I don't think I could write a whole book on it now, but I could probably talk quite a lot about the language of neurodiversity as well. Great. Thanks, Niels. Thanks for that bit of feedback as well. And thanks, I'm really appreciating all the thumbs up and everything that are happening as well. Very, very encouraging. So I'm not going to go into this graphic at all, actually, but I'm just going to say that this, I think, is a really useful graphic, not created by me. I've credited it at the bottom there. If you were interested in being neuro-affirming in your day-to-day life, you couldn't go too far wrong if you photocopied or printed out that graphic and stuck it above your desk, because it basically attends to all the different elements of what neuro-affirming might look like. And again, for me, neuro-affirming is about actually welcoming and embracing rather than attending to or adjusting for or accommodating. It's about really kind of building this in. Yeah, let's smash the dominance, can we, please? Yeah, typical versus dominant. Yeah, and also I don't tend to use the word normal because that's socially constructed and really has no objective meaning. So there are dominant norms, and they're, you know, kind of coded and embedded in social interactions and things like that. So I often think about it like this. So yes, that is to say, broadly speaking, neuro-affirming practice, this graphic is a really nice illustration of it. And then what I'm trying to do is attend to some of these elements, but specifically related to coaching. I should say that with my coaching practice, I'm not even fully qualified yet, which is also like, why, oh my God, should I be running a session for 59 people? However, I mean, most coaches will know you never really stop learning, and you're always experimenting and, yeah, trying to understand things from others' perspectives and whatnot. So what I have done is spent the last year coaching predominantly disabled staff, and within that they would identify as predominantly neurodivergent as well. And I've done a classic autistic deep dive, become completely obsessed, haven't thought about anything else, do it all in my spare time as well, to create a bit of a neuro-affirming approach that I'm sharing here today. But I will also say that all of your context for, you know, using coaching is going to be really different from mine. So mine has been one-to-one coaching staff within my institution. You may just embed coaching approaches in work that you do more broadly. You may be coaching students. There may not be like a formal kind of contracting element to it. So please try and take the structure that I've been in with coaching and apply it to your own practice, whatever that looks like. So not every single point I make today might be relevant to your context. Park the ones that aren't, and then hopefully pick up the ones that are. When you decide to train as a coach, you realize you've always been one. Yeah, totally, Emma. I actually am doing the qualification because I realize I've been coaching people for years, and I just wanted that kind of rigor to know, actually, is it appropriate? Am I being ethical? Things like that. Did you choose coaching, or did coaching choose you? Yes, 100% for me is that as well. Autistic person or person with autism, you said you prefer the former. Is it best to use this generally or work out individual preference on this? The vast majority of the autistic community, I don't have the stats and I don't have the study to hand, prefer autistic person, but people vary, even autistic people. So actually, Carolyn, I would always say feel free to check with the individual. If you need to default, it might be a bit safer because there's a majority preference for autistic person. It might be safer to default to autistic person. But I mean, listen, I love when people ask me. I have no issues with people asking me at all. And it gets me to monologue about it for probably about 20 minutes when that wasn't what they were asking. But anyway, yeah, Ruth, it's a good approach, definitely. Okay, so moving us on. So this is the emerging framework. And I suppose I do use emerging intentionally because I'm very mindful it has only been a year of kind of trialing it and testing it. But it's making a lot of sense. And what I will also say is I kind of work, in an intersectional way. So although we're talking about neurodiversity today, and we're talking about neuro-affirming practice, my fundamental belief is that if you were to make some of these adaptations to make your practice, whatever that looks like, more neuro-affirming, I fundamentally think classic inclusive practice, it will make it better for most people. Whether anybody from any kind of historically oppressed group, anybody who's marginalized, anybody, caregivers juggling multiple responsibilities, if you can take some of these approaches, I think, like I said, they will actually start to serve a wide group of people. So I'm not just looking at this through the lens of this is just for autistic people or this is just broadly for neurodivergent people. I'm thinking this, I think, establishes better practice that is more accommodating and understanding of the complex lives that many, many people live. So it's worth saying that at the beginning. Sebastian, you said, yeah, in our practice, it's usually group-based sessions with both neurodivergent and neurotypical folks in the session. So a lot is trying to foster understanding and make it work for everyone. Well, that sounds really lovely, actually. That sounds like a nice space to be in. Great. So you've got these slides beforehand. Hopefully everybody who signed up maybe a bit in advance should have them, because I'm very mindful what's on the screen is very small, but we're going to be going through it in a bit more detail now. What I am going to do, as I mentioned, I was going to talk about the practical. So I'm going to concentrate today on those 8 sort of diagonal segments as opposed to the 7 vertical segments, because that's more sort of where the theory sits. Maybe in the future I can run a theory session once I fully wrap my own head around it as well. And I think I said this earlier, but I'll just say it again to labour the point. You can work with some theories or approaches that are, really suited. That's something you'll sometimes come across. This is a really suitable approach for neurodivergent clients or neurodivergent individuals. But if you haven't set up your whole coaching practice and those interactions, those conversations in a way that is neuro-affirming, that the safety won't be established and maintained sufficiently for the individual to potentially engage in a really meaningful way with whatever lovely framework or whatever lovely theory you're using with them. So while it might seem slightly more boring to look at the practical considerations, I would argue that it is the fundamental, that is the foundations actually for being neuro-affirming. So let me go. And yeah, great. Thanks, Yelna, for responding to the slide requests. So language of contracting, contracting has been a really big deal in the apprenticeship that I'm doing, the coaching apprenticeship that I'm doing, and I absolutely love it. Contracting, for anybody, I don't know, who might not know, because I don't want to assume shared understanding, but contracting is normally like that initial setting out kind of expectations conversation, maybe talking about your role as the coach, or if you're working with a group, how we'll interact, how we'll hold the space together, what responsibilities we might have to one another, that kind of thing. And it turns out I love contracting because I'm like, as an autistic person, can I just start every interaction with another human with contracting? Because it's so clear. Like, can I just say, like, I'm here because I want to get this out of this conversation. Why are you here? And that would actually just be so beautiful and so seamless for me, instead of me spending like the first however many months interacting with somebody in a professional context going like, I don't really know what this is about or what the end game is here. So I am a great believer in contracting. However, when I started the apprenticeship, our apprenticeship provider, who are excellent, I should say, but they provided us with a document, a template document for contracting that covered all the standard things. It did say things like, let me just flick to my notes as a reminder. As the coach, you must take responsibility for your learning. You can only cancel in a real emergency, and you must come prepared. So that's just 3 examples. There's loads more I had problems with in the contract. But as an autistic person, take responsibility for my learning. Like, what does that actually mean? Like, are you just telling me to turn up to everything? I don't know what that means. That's really, really vague language to me. But I also feel a bit like it's a teacher-pupil relationship already with the use of that language. I'm like, oh, am I going to get like in trouble if I'm not perceived to take responsibility? With the real emergency, it's like, again, can you give me some examples of what a real emergency is? Because I can tell you that like what sends me into panic is not something that will send other people into panic, but does that count as real then? In whose eyes or in whose mind does that realness have to exist? So, and then the last one with coming prepared. Again, what does come prepared mean to sessions? Like, what does that actually look like? But should I not come if I haven't managed to prepare because I've been dealing with a really bad flare up of my chronic pain for the intervening 2 weeks? So, you know, it's like, actually, that's quite punitive then, isn't it? If I'm not showing up in a desirable way because I can't be prepared, should I just not engage at all? Is this now not a space for me to be able to just be myself in? So these are really, subtleties. That is actually a great word, Emma. These are real subtleties in the language that we use, but they immediately put me on edge. They immediately make me feel like, there's an invisible, what's the word? There's an invisible goal or contract here, like visible elements of that contract that I'm not totally sure on what they mean. Therefore, it's likely that I might fail, or I will have a really classic trauma response, which is to fawn. So I will do 10 times as much work in between each session to prove to you that I am a good client and that I am a good coachee and that I'm really committed, but to the detriment of my health and other things I have going on in my life. So we really, really need to be careful in those initial conversations, whatever they look like for you, but in using language in a way that A, it's clear, but B, it doesn't have judgment built into it already. Ruth, it makes you assume that you've done something wrong before you even started. 100% to what you're saying right now about overcompensating. Yeah, it's a really classic fawning response. Like, if you don't give me a KPI or tell me exactly where the goal is, I will do the thing 10 times better than you ever even imagined it could be done. And that's great for you, particularly if you're my manager, it's in a work context. But that's not great for me because I'm doing that with everything where there's a bit of lack of clarity. And therefore, I'm constantly in burnout. So we have to be really, really clear about those expectations and actually where there is space for flexibility and being compassionate as well. The number of times I've tried to smash therapy. Oh yeah, that one's on my list as well. I'm really good at therapy, actually. So it's not something you should aim to be good at, though, but that's how those spaces have been set up to reinforce the idea I have to be good at this. Yeah, and burnout. So important to consider the nuances, the small things, should versus want, etc. Language is so important. Yeah, thanks, Leslie. I think taking why out of your questions could help. Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. Yeah. Oh, I'm gonna think about that, Emmanuel. Thank you. Okay, so I won't say anything else on that. What time are we at? My visual timer says we're okay. So very much in keeping with what we've just said and thinking along the same lines, contracting for lateness or missed sessions, again, whatever contracting looks like for you, this would be a very generous thing to do, but if there are any chronic latecomers, So people who are always late. If you are chronically late for things, would you be willing to put in the chat or put up your hand to maybe explain why that happens sometimes? I'll let that sit for a minute. Okay, we've already got a really great one. Ruth, I'll come to you. I'll pick up on what Leanne said in the chat and then I'll come to you, Ruth. Thanks. Leanne has said, living my life in waiting mode. So for anybody not aware, many ADHD people can experience, I don't know if phenomenon is the right word, but called waiting room, where, and I think this is what you're referring to, Leanne. I notice you've got your hand up as well. So if you want to clarify anything, but for me, this is definitely about, I'm almost, if I know I have something big coming up, I'm almost frozen. My mind is so consumed with that thing. I can't do any, it's like until the decks have been cleared and that thing has happened, nothing else exists. But I also can't fully engage with it either because I'm a bit frozen about it. So it's this weird contradiction of like today, oh my God, I've got this 2-hour session with all these people. There is no point in trying to do to-do list. There is literally, it doesn't exist. I cannot, but almost in the obsessing and the over it, I can then end up being late for the very thing that I'm in waiting mode for. Leanne, is that kind of what you're speaking to?
Yeah, absolutely that. I'm ADHD and I have that like conflict of the two sides all the time. So if I've got I don't know, say I've got like a dental appointment or a work presentation at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm like just doing things that are not productive at all because I have to prep for that. So if I've got a diary full of meetings, it's almost better because it's one thing tick, the next thing tick, the next thing tick. If I've got sort of free time is awful for me because I need the kind of structure of the now and the next of what's going to happen next. But if I know I've got something big coming up, I can't think about what's going to happen after. So I can't plan for what might happen the next day or even the evening. The worst case scenario for me is somebody says, oh, what are you doing tomorrow night? It's like, I can't think about tomorrow night because I've got this thing happening in a few hours. So it's, it is like the waiting room. I'm just sort of stuck in waiting mode and I tend to I'm really, really unproductive with my time then. So Candy Crush is my friend and I just sit playing Candy Crush for hours until I'm late. I'm late then because I've pushed it until the last minute.
So online card games, that's my thing. It's like I'm doing something, I have a focus, I'm not obsessing too much, but it's also not really a useful way of spending my time. And housework I've actually found really helpful because I need to move in those moments as well. I'm going to pick up Ruth. You had your hand up. I don't know if you still want to come in. Do you? I want to give you, thank you, Leanne, by the way. That was really great. And it so resonates as well with me. Ruth, did you want to come in?
Oh, I mean, Leanne had me absolutely in stitches. You absolutely nailed it. Like, that's exactly me every day of the week. It's fine if I always plan things for the morning. If I want to do something, somebody says, can we make a meeting? Yes, can it be early? Because otherwise I'm going to spend all day pacing the floor, anticipating the conversation, I'm an ADHD, but expecting the conversation, you're prepping the conversation, and then by that time you're so exhausted that you end up being late because you've exhausted yourself, sort of saying, well, what are these possible outcomes for this this conversation, or how could this possibly go? So and I end up being half an hour early or half an hour late no matter what.
Oh, Ruth, I hear you so much. And exactly that thing, it's all like you put so much emotional labor into the idea of being prepared and ready and available, then it's like you trip at the last minute and you end up arriving 5 minutes late and you're like, but I've done nothing else all day except kind of wait for this thing to start. How can I be late?
How is it possible that I'm late again?
Exactly. And I will also say I am 5 minutes late. So Paul, you said you're trying to fit things into 5-minute gaps. Yeah, have to leave the space alone. Yeah, I'm also 5 minutes late for most things, quite frankly, because I don't want to do chit chat. And I work predominantly online, and most online meetings will start with a bit of chit chat. And I don't have the brain power for it. The amount of energy it takes out of me, that 5 minutes can cost me more in energy than the whole rest of the 55-minute meeting. So I kind of intentionally go, that's what you folks over there need. I don't actually need that chit chat. So I am just coming 5 minutes late. So I probably look a little bit rude, a little bit unreliable. But like, if you hear what people are saying, what both Ruth and Leanne have shared, it's almost like an overcommitment to the thing. So when people are late to something, it's not an indication of their commitment level in a lot of scenarios, or their interest level. And I get really frustrated when people say, oh, if somebody's late all the time, it's because they don't care, or they just don't want to engage, or they don't value it. That says a lot about you as a person, I think. Your interpretation and maybe your kind of hang-ups about those perceptions, then it says about the person who maybe is experiencing that lateness. I want to pick up on some of the things in the chat because I haven't had a chance to read them. So Maria, if time blindness can't measure the passage of time, well, totally. I think I can fit 40 things into 7 minutes, and then I'm utterly shocked every single time when I somehow can't. But I can't replicate that understanding. I can't take that learning forward to the next moment when I have 7 minutes and 40 things to do, which is a real source of frustration for me. Time blindness, yeah. So sorry, that's what we've done. How many hours do you have for the answer, Celine? Yes, I agree. How many hours do you have? Niels, it's my optimism that makes me turn and play for my commitment. Oh yeah, I can squeeze that in. Exactly. Yeah, totally recognize that as well. It's useful to have a why. I'm just going down what Anne-Marie has said. It's useful not to have why with all people coming to coaching. This can be reframed as what is the reason that. That's quite nice as well. Yeah, thank you. Celine, not now. ADHD way of thinking means that things don't exist until they are now, and usually I am then late. Yeah, that's me. Different time perception, don't realize how long things will take. Difficulty with transitions, yeah, that's very much me as well. Hate being late, so you end up being very early instead. I have the waiting room effect, so I plan everything for mornings if I can, and my least brain thinking activities in the afternoon. Yeah, Sarah, I'd operate quite a similar approach as well. I do all my meetings in the morning as much as possible because it's not a time to do meetings in the afternoon. This is such an affirming experience in itself by design, so I'm glad, Emma, you're saying that. Celine, yeah, do you want to come on and follow up on what you were saying?
Yeah, it was just if you want to not have to read all the comments I made, but like, yeah, there's a lot of that. The now, not now is a very strong one for me. It's like things don't really exist until it's like, oh, that's the time. But when it's the time, I forgot that I actually had to do all the stuff. For example, going to an appointment doesn't mean transporting myself from being in pajamas to the place. I actually have to do a lot of these things that actually takes time. And I realized at 36 years old that, yeah, putting on clothes takes time and time the measurable things. And I had to, work through measuring things and actually timing some activities to learn. It's like this process of learning how long things can take. It's intellectual process that I have to go through, and I go through with my clients too, that is not innate. And so having to learn that intellectually and purposefully can be really helpful.
And I often say being autistic and ADHD is like living life on manual. Nothing comes automatically to me. So I have to manually work out like how long that would take. I also have to manually work out all of the steps. I often underappreciate the number of steps required to do or achieve a thing. So it's like, some people say just empty the dishwasher. And I'm like, oh, I sort of have to clear a space on the counter first because there's clutter everywhere to empty the things out of. And then I have to do that. And then it's just a lot more complicated, basically, than people might fully appreciate.
I love this. Yeah, this metaphor. I'll take it if that's okay.
Yes, absolutely do. Okay, I'm going to really quickly go through the chat because I know I've got really deep into this one now and I'm like, oh, I need to move on a bit. But so Maria, it impacts me in terms of estimating how long I need for something. Yeah, so again, really similar. And you've discovered that this is called object impermanence. I've heard about that. I don't know too much. I know about it from a child development stage, but not so much from an ADHD kind of perspective. Spent school life on punctuality and homework report, so many detentions. So it's just, it's cruel, really. Emmanuel, can using specific coaching models through self-coaching help overcome some of these challenges? I'm not actually going to go into that now, simply because that's probably a whole session in and of itself. I'm very mindful with coaching of addressing challenges or problems in isolation. And again, because I work from a affirming perspective, it's like, well, how can this be an advantage? Not overlooking the challenges it does bring, but like, how can we kind of flip that a little bit? So Emmanuel, sorry, I'm not going to fully answer your question now. Leanne, although you're bloody brilliant at getting things done at the last minute, yeah, neurodivergent people very often, hate to generalize, but can be great in a crisis, because actually I live in crisis mode, so it's my normal. So actually have a real and objectively real crisis happening, and I'm like, oh yeah, I can thrive. Okay, I'm not going to move on, because I'm just going to say what I do in my coaching then is I contract for all of this. So I say to people, please don't bring shame into this space if you're late. I'm not judging you. There's a million different reasons why you might be late. You don't have to explain to me why you're late. However, I only have limited time. So if we have an hour in, I will stay in the session it's normally online, well, always online. I will stay in the room for 10 minutes. If you haven't arrived, I will leave just so I can crack on with other stuff. Send me a Teams message tagging me so that I pick up on it, saying, oh, I'm now in the space, and I will rejoin. If that means we only have 40 minutes to do a session, I won't compensate and go 20 minutes over. I will have agreed we will just do the 40 minutes. If that 40 minutes is valuable to you, then that is valuable to me. So I am happy to speak for 40 minutes rather than an hour. So that's what I'll do. Also for missed sessions, I mean, the nature of my disability is dynamic, so it shifts and changes from, as I say, day to day, hour to hour. So it's hard for me to be predictable and consistent sometimes. So I would much rather reschedule sessions with somebody at the last minute than, have them miss out on a session. I am coaching internally. I'm getting paid through my salary to do those sessions. So rescheduling is not that big a deal. If you're working privately and you're relying on that kind of hourly rate from that client, rescheduling can be a bit more problematic. But I think it's worth thinking about what flexibility can you build into your interactions with your clients, whoever those clients are, and whatever way it looks. Clear language, good. I love do not bring shame to this space. Borrow. It's so not helpful, shame. Most, particularly late diagnosed neurodivergent people, carry a whole world load of shame. And, we're only going to actually be able to shed some of that if it's not constantly proved to us again and again that we should feel ashamed for just being who we are. So, okay, hopefully I've kind of addressed that enough. I'm going to do this one more slide and then I promise we will go on a break. How many, if people work kind of on a more one-to-one model, do you mind saying maybe in the chat how many sessions you do and how long those sessions generally are? Like, are they an hour? Do you do longer? Do you do shorter? And I'll give everyone a minute to pop any thoughts in the chat for that one. Great, Anne-Marie and Harriet. And how many sessions do you do in total with an individual? 3 by 45-minute sessions, great, thank you. 4 to 6, around 90 minutes, usually up to 6 sessions, but flexible, and 1 hour, fairly flexible, client-led. 8, up to 6 sessions for 1 hour, 6 over 6, yeah. 4 sessions of 1 hour plus contracting. Yeah, 1 hour, 6 to 8. It depends. 6 sessions max for 1 hour outside or on Teams. Oh, yeah, I haven't got the chance to do any outside coaching yet. I'm really keen. Tend to do 1 hour sessions, number of sessions in not my decision and varies. Oh, they're not your decision. Okay. 3 to 5 sessions, 1 hour. Yeah, thank you. So there is a bit of variation there, which is actually quite nice to see. It's been so drilled into us that it's like 6 by 6, as in 6 1-hour sessions. And when I asked in another space with some really experienced coaches, which some of you probably are as well, why are we doing 6 sessions? Nobody really knew. Like, oh, it has to be time bound, otherwise it becomes like very therapeutic. Oh, I get that. It shouldn't be just like an open-ended, and it's not mentoring. So, it's a different thing. It does need to be time bound. But my call to action would be, think about how many sessions you're doing as default and what duration those sessions are. And then think about those default modes in the context of whatever client is sitting in front of you. Because personally, you will probably already know by me, I talk a lot, I monologue a lot, I like to go into detail. There's a lot of context I have to explain about my experience as well. And my experiences aren't shared with the vast majority of people. So if I'm working with a coach, for example, who is not neurodivergent, like I almost might have to explain what autism is. So it's not very fair if I have to use huge chunks of my session kind of doing what is essentially education with somebody else in order to get to the kernel of what we're trying to talk about. Now, I haven't had that with coaches, I should say that, because I've predominantly had neurodivergent coaches coaching me. So I would question whether we can flip our models a little bit to be more client-centered rather than default modes. It's good to see that there is variation going on. And Paul, you've said you've extended beyond designated 4. Yeah, I would definitely need more than 4. I've been working with some clients for 10 to 20 hours and it has brought some amazing results. I got access to work funding. This won't happen now because the Labour government is now decimating access to work. But I got access to work funding, which is funding to support disabled people in work, for 30 hours of coaching. And that was specialist coaching. And that I probably maybe needed 25, but that was amazing to get that. So I would just question if people need to talk to process things, if they need to talk in greater detail and at greater length, and you want to be there in service of them, so you want to be able to create the space for them to do that before you kind of direct them, or not direct them, but like interrupt with a provocative question or whatever it might be. Actually, how can we do that if we're really, really time bound in a very rigid way? So I've had some clients who we've had 9 sessions, they have been 1 hour. That's more to do with me managing my energy levels. So 1 hour, I can't go past 1.5 hours. For a coaching session. But thinking about some of our default processes, we might not have full control over them, obviously, but where we do, can we adapt them to the needs of those individual clients? Can we discuss that at contracting as well? They may not know specifically how many sessions they need, but are we checking in at a kind of halfway point, talking about the remaining sessions, seeing if that's still the right amount for them? I'm going to stop there so that we can have a break. So it means if we can be really precise, we'll come back at 9 minutes past 12, just because I know we have loads to pack in. So go cameras off if you've got cameras on, keep your mics off as well, go off, have your break, and then I will start back at 9 minutes past 12. Thanks, everyone. Great. There's one thing I forgot to actually mention that I think is really relevant to particularly like the idea of coming late to sessions or missing sessions and things like that, is what I consider like a compound effect. Because if there's a series of things or an initial project launch or something, and I struggle at that first hurdle to engage for what could be many, many reasons, and I'm late, or I seem a little unprepared when I show up and I feel like everybody was thinking, God, that's really poor. And, it's really likely that experience will then shape the rest of my experiences in that space, because I'm now going to be more anxious about the next session and whatever that sequence is. And that may make me more inclined to be more late or to be less clear on what I need to do to prepare. So then I turn up and I similarly seem like a little bit disorganized or just, not totally all together, whatever that means, on things. So what I will also say is, if there is an element of shame at play for people, it's really likely that one perceived misstep on their part can actually really shape their ability to interact with all the following things as well. So it's really important to recognize that's why I think the contracting conversation, the initial setting out of everything, is so important, because if you can diffuse a lot of that in the first session, reassure them it's okay to be late. What does this look like for you? What does it need to look like for you? It means even if they are late or they're not prepared or whatever it might be, it's maybe they're not showing up with that kind of big emotional load as well. And I think that that is really important. That's something really significant we can gift to our clients as well, is to take away some of that emotional labor. Great. Yeah, this is so a thing for you in all aspects of your life, Emma. Yeah, totally. And it's terrible because you do just feel like, oh, it's sending out all the wrong messages. Like every time I've interacted with this person or like on this project or topic or in this coaching context, I've never quite showed up like how I would sort of like to. And therefore, you know, what are people thinking of me? What are they saying about me afterwards? Those kinds of things. Yeah. No, I'm not going to get your name right. I'm sorry. Alsa, is it? No problem. You head off and yeah, you can have a look at the slides and the recording afterwards. Great. So now that I've remembered that point, let's move on to the next one. So checking how stress or anxiety shows up. Are people happy to put in the chat, or again, you can come on mic to say, how might you know another person is distressed? Let's say, what might tell you that they're distressed beyond their words, but just thinking more about what you notice in them. How might you know that they are actually distressed? Emma, do you want to come in?
Thank you. As a neurodivergent person who has spent their lives scanning their environment for safety and any potential dangers or triggers, I find myself incredibly intuitive towards clients' subtleties, tone of voice, facial expression, hand movements, shoulder position, pace of the way they're speaking. It's all there and I can see it loud and clear. I can hear it, see it loud and clear.
Oh, Emma, the hypervigilance that comes about from being traumatized is like really an amazing tool in coaching. And that's definitely what I've found, that I can just pick up on the tiniest nuance and shift in energy because I'm constantly scanning my horizon for all of those things, because I don't seem to intuitively know when I've misunderstood something or when something's gone wrong or that's that person's intention or whatever it might be. So I think that's really lovely what you're describing there, is those really, really subtle little shifts. And I definitely, that really makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you for sharing. We've also got in the chat, the person could be caught between thoughts. Yeah, it's good to almost kind of like struggling to articulate something. Could be agitated, changes from the usual behavior and body language. Remembering that this could look different in different people based on base behavior and body language. Yeah, what's their kind of default mode in a way. Change in behavior compared to previous sessions, if not the first session. Yeah, good point. They tell you they're breathing, they show up differently to how you have got to know them. Very quiet or talking too much, anything different from what they usually do. Distracted, shaking of leg, hot, withdrawn, body language, yeah, different for all. Yeah, I'm really loving actually the variation and the nuance again in some of those. When I've done this session previously, it has been things like, which is not a criticism, but it's just very different starting points. It has been things like, oh, they might be crying, or, you know, they might look almost cross, or, you know, things like that. Because what I often say to people, and for some people it's like, how can that possibly be real? I could be incredibly distressed and you would never know by looking at me. There would literally be no way of you knowing. So I don't blame anybody over the years who hasn't recognized my distress, because I just do not express that emotion or those types of emotions in the same way as other people. It's not intentional. It's possibly learnt because I was distressed a lot as a child. And I think it was probably, you know, repeated messaging of how could that bother you? It doesn't bother anybody else. Nobody else can smell that. You know, that can't be itchy. How can you feel that? You know, constantly questioning actually of your experience really is very powerful in encouraging you to just then absorb all of those experiences internally and not express them in a visible way, in a way that might be considered typical. So what I do is I contract for this stuff. There's that word, contracting again, but I contract for this stuff early on in the coaching relationship to say, like, what happens when you are distressed or when you're upset or worried, you know, what might that look like for you? And what's really interesting, but also quite logical, is a lot of people can't actually answer that, particularly if they're autistic. And that can be down to, and these experiences are not unique to autistic people. Again, autistic people are we are a natural variation of what it is to be human. So many of our experience are, you know, experienced by other people, but we have a higher rate of experiencing. I'm going to put these two, and I'm going to hope that I'm going to spell them right. Oh, I feel like I've not spelled that right, but you know what? It's a good approximation. So if you were to look it up, yeah, Ruth, thank you. Interoception. If you were to look up these two words, I will give you my very probably messy layperson's interpretation of these terms, but alexithymia is a real challenge identifying and connecting with emotions. So to be totally honest, if you wanted me to tell you what I feel about something, maybe ask me in text a week after that thing has happened, because I will give you what I think is an approximation of the correct response in the moment. Oh yeah, I'm really glad that happened. And then a week later, I'm like, oh, this really doesn't work for me. So I can't connect readily. It's like just a broken connection. I just can't. Those are all the feelings are there, and I'm still having to deal with the fallout or the implications of those feelings, but I can't actually join up in the moment, particularly with spoken language, what those feelings are. I can't name them, identify the nuance of them. So alexithymia is something to be really aware of. And then interoception differences. So interoception is one of our senses, and it's the ability to sense or read your internal body cues. So a significant source of my chronic pain is I can't tell I'm in pain for a long time until it's kind of at a level like 9. I mean, I'm trying to learn how to tap in earlier, but I will again have to deal with all of the side effects of being in pain, like feeling really irritable, feeling really exhausted, not being able to concentrate. But it will often take my partner to point out to me that I'm in pain. So possibly that sounds wild to some of you, but that is my experience, and that is the experience of an awful lot of autistic people. And it is more broadly an experience anybody can have. You can have differences with alexithymia or interoception, whether or not you're neurodivergent. So I would always caution against, reading into visible signs, or lack of signs, actually, some cases, and assuming that we know where that person is at. So really trying to understand from the beginning how they maybe experience those things. And if they don't know, because it's really useful, right, to know what you're feeling, to be able to name that feeling, and it kind of helps with processing it, or to be aware of those sensations within your body as well. So from my understanding, alexithymia does include interoception difficulties, i.e. difficulty to understand or pick up physical sensations, body cues. Yeah, like for me, they run hand in hand, because the emotions in your body are so intertwined that actually if I'm struggling to identify my emotions, my body is still experiencing them in some way, but then I'm struggling to read what my body is telling me as well. So I think there is a really close relationship, and there's actually kind of some emerging stuff saying, particularly I think around interoception, that it's actually more side effect, it's not the right word, but side effect of trauma, of learning to misbelieve your feelings, your sensations in your body, because you were told so much that your sensory sensitivities shouldn't exist as you were a child. And I can definitely relate to that. Yeah, and I just learned what alexithymia is. Yeah, definitely do more research, because I'd say my definitions are not scientific. I can relate to this. My appendix burst and I didn't go to hospital for nearly 24 hours, and then sat in A&E calmly reading my book. Yeah, autistic people, and Maria, I don't know if you're autistic, and I'm not saying you are or not, but autistic people really struggle in healthcare settings, and this is one of the reasons. I said a 9 on the pain scale. I mean, the pain scale doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand how you can articulate pain as an arbitrary number. Can somebody show me what 10 is? So then I know in comparison. Feels really subjective to me. So yes, yeah, it's quite an interesting one. Is it similar to having low theory of mind? I don't know, because I don't really believe personally in the theory of mind theory. So I probably am not the best person to ask that to, Leanne. And Ruth, always asking for a scale. Yeah, how does that scale? I don't know. Yeah, it's confusing to me. So sorry, less about me, but when you are contracting, like, we do need to acknowledge that not everybody is going to, or they're not going to embody their emotions and those sensations in the same way as we might imagine people would. There is no just blanket way of doing this or default way of doing this. Sebastian, I was once told your leg can't be broken because you aren't crying. Cue me going away later needing 3 surgeries because the leg was indeed broken and I just walked on it for a week. Yeah, this is really, really not unusual. Theory of mind, yeah, theory has been found to be problematic, unfortunately. And this happened to your partner too. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but like, yeah, this is wrong, right? This is not right. So you got high stakes medical intervention scenarios where you're not expressing those things in a way people fully expect. And then you've got coaching context. The stakes aren't quite as high, but actually, you know, if somebody's waiting for me to cry to show my distress, but I'm maybe verbally even saying, oh, that's quite distressing, if I manage to even get to that point, but I'm not being taken quite so seriously because I don't seem distressed, I mean, this trust is all gone in that relationship then, isn't it? And it's like, okay, I'm just going to toe the line now and kind of tell them what they want because I just need to get to the end of these interactions. More reading for you. Yeah, I can't even actually go into theory of mind because it would take me all day, and I can't even define fully why it's problematic off the top of my head. So I won't attempt, Leanne, or I'll just get myself in a jumble. More reading to do. Okay, so next, if we go to doing the work in session. After today, I should say, I'll send you some prompt questions. I'll put them in the chat. May not be today, that are kind of like little bits of homework questions that you can take away that relate to each one of these slides, like so questions to interrogate your practice like a little bit further. But it's worth saying that homework doesn't actually work for everybody, and going through school systems can be quite a punitive experience for neurodivergent people. So asking a client to go away and, you know, work through a framework or use a tool or trial it and experiment with something in their everyday life might not be the best fit. Granted, I do love a task. So I am the kind of person who's like, oh my God, yeah, amazing. But again, I'm going to try and ace that task and report back to you really positively rather than necessarily engaging with it for the purpose you intended me to engage with it. So I often wonder if there's more of an argument for doing the work together in coaching sessions. That also speaks to maybe needing more sessions or longer sessions. But this is also a form of body doubling. I will tell you what body doubling is because I'm looking at the time going, oh yeah, if I keep going to the chat, do keep using the chat, but maybe I'll ask slightly less questions than I'd planned. Body doubling is fundamentally just doing a task alongside another person. I'm sure there's AI body doubling already, so maybe it's not even fair to say that it's alongside another person, but it's very big or like well known in the ADHD community, less so in the autistic community, but I think it's got a real place there as well. But there are lots of tasks that I will just really struggle to do or get started with. And again, it's not an indication of my commitment to that thing. It might also be a freeze response again, where I'm just like, oh my God, it's so overwhelming. I just don't even know where to start. And body doubling for me just looks like I'm really fortunate, because again, this is not going to last forever, but I'm really fortunate to have a support worker funded through Access to Work. She's actually based in France, so we meet online all the time. But I will sometimes say, I just need to do the budget spreadsheet. And I mean, dyscalculia means that's like learning Japanese to me. I just need to do the budget spreadsheet. I just have to do it. Like, it has to be done. So, but I just can't do it. So can you just join me on a call for an hour? She might ask me at the beginning, oh, what do you want to get out of the hour? Where are you hoping to get to with it? And then I will just spend that hour with her. She's normally crocheting or something while I work on it. And I need to say a lot of things out loud. So I'll just be talking to myself basically, oh, no, not that line, this line, and working through it. And for me, that's the way I use body doubling. Other people like to use it to do the same type of task simultaneously, physically sitting beside another person. So doing admin together. Let's meet in the office on Friday for 2 hours and just do our week's like catch up admin together. Other people use it for things like housework, where they literally play YouTube videos of people doing housework while they need to do their housework to keep them focused and motivated on things. So I think if we could borrow some of those kind of ideas around body doubling and bring them into coaching, where we actually bring some of the exercises, some of the explorative tools that we would normally maybe hand over to a person, and create space within the session to actually do that. And you don't necessarily need to be asking extra questions or basically interrupting. You can just be holding that space. And I'm perfectly happy for that to be a use of me and my time. I don't think that's a waste of me being there if it's creating the container for that person to do the work that you think is, and you've decided together, is probably going to support them. So yeah, doing a lot of body doubling on Teams or by messages, or using some free platforms. Flown, yeah, I haven't used Flown yet, but I have heard good things about it. So thank you for putting in the links, Celine. When coaching, how do you manage your own personal characteristics? For example, as a fellow enthusiastic interrupter and a fixer, it takes a lot of effort as a coach. Hear you. Won't speak too long on this, but just to say that I contract for those things. I say, like, I'm not always clear on when somebody's finished a sentence, because I'm not, and I don't know how people are meant to magically know that. So if I interrupt you, can you please tell me? And I try and create a lot of safety, obviously, for them to feel they actually can tell me that. I also explain my interruption is enthusiasm, not that I'm done with what you're talking about. I talk about eye contact. I'm going to be better able to listen to you if I'm not looking at the screen. And that's part of us deciding whether we want to work together, because if that's going to be problematic for somebody, which is fine, and they're well within their right to find that problematic, then maybe we're not the best fit. So, I mean, coaching, learning on the apprenticeship has been learning how to listen better for me, because it's not the pace and the way my brain naturally works, but also accepting I'm never going to be the one who sits there almost silent for an hour and then just asks like 3 powerful questions, right? That's not the kind of coach I am. Yeah, Emma.
Thank you. I did an apprenticeship as well for my qualification, so go apprentices. I'm just curious to know if your apprenticeship was neuro-affirming in its delivery.
I've had a wonderful CMS. Is that the same term? Did you have a CMS?
Yes.
So coach, mentor, supervisor. I've had a wonderful CMS who's also neurodivergent, and just exploring that for her own self later in life. So that's been a beautiful relationship, and it's kind of held a lot of the bits of the apprenticeship together that weren't neuro-affirming.
Was that intentional? Sorry, I'm interrupting now. Was that intentional? Did it just turn out that way?
It just turned out that way.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Great.
And I went to a webinar that was not run by that coach, mentor, supervisor, but by the wider organization. And this is a really stark reminder of the impact small things and small use of words can have. At the start of the session, it was a 3-hour session. I cannot be seen on camera for that long. I just can't. I just need to be moving, and I need to be doing different stuff, and I just can't be on camera for that long. And I had established that in the local setting, but this was a webinar being delivered by somebody else in the much wider team. And the first thing they said was, please, everybody turn on your cameras for the duration as a sign of respect to your colleagues. I was so stressed out by that my Fitbit heart rate monitor went off because my heart rate went so high. And immediately my pain kicked in. And I could not, there was no learning for me in that session. I just had to get through it. And then I overperformed, because that's my response. I over contributed and put my hand up, and actually I just needed to not be there, because that was not a safe place for me at all. So no, it hasn't been predominantly neuro-affirming, but I've managed to carve out this little space and banged on about this stuff enough that people maybe are slightly more aware. So I will move on to the next slide, but I just want to pick up on, I take a lot of notes, which means that I'm less likely to forget an idea. Yes, Celine, totally the same. And also gives me something to keep busy when listening and an outlet for my need to be doing something. I'm a great note taker. Unfortunately, my handwriting is illegible after the fact, but it's helped with my memory anyway, just the writing down of the scroll in the moment. Processing time and extended reflection. And again, this speaks back a little bit to the 6 sessions, 6 hours, which, like I said, it's great. Not all of you are defaulting to that, but I do need, if you want to know what I genuinely think about something, again, it's a bit like with the emotions, like ask me in a week. I will give you the response that I think you want, not to manipulate you, but because my life has taught me that that's the way to get on easier in the world in some senses. So I need to think. I've had clients who I'll ask a question and they will write the question down, and then they will just sit and they will just keep making notes in their notebook or whatever it is for a few minutes, and I will just sit there with them, and then they will tell me what they think, or they might contribute in the chat, or they might just be like, I need to think about that, which is absolutely fine, and I make a note to come back to that, or invite them to come back to it if they think it would be useful. So I think, again, just finding time for people not having automated responses to things is really, really important within coaching. And I'm driven by being productive, right? And I measure my value in what I've achieved in many ways. So as a coach, I have to be really mindful of that. If I thought we were sort of going to, if I sketched out a shape of a session, I thought maybe we were going to hit on these 3 topics and we only hit on one, as long as that was in service of the client and what they needed, then I have to accept that we're not getting to those other 2 topics, and that's not what it's about. My ideal sort of, it's not quite an agenda obviously for coaching, but my ideal sense of what we should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then body language and movement. Do people know the term stimming? If you know what stimming is, you can pop it in the chat maybe. We've got some thumbs up, and I'm guessing we'll get some things maybe pop up in the chat. Yeah, self-soothing, self-regulation. So stimming is short for self-stimulatory behavior or movements. Repetitive motion that makes you feel better, but often makes other people uncomfortable. Oh yeah, 2 sides to it, Ruth, eh? Every single human stims. I've never met a person who doesn't, but for some reason there's this idea of it being like a really anomalous physical like expression. Exactly like Ruth is saying. So I stim all the time. I have therapy in my hand, or I've got these other little fidget objects that I've made. I just need to constantly be doing something with my hands. Lots of people hand flap. Lots of people rock. I'm a big advocate of rocking, but I will not rock in most spaces because I know how that is perceived, and I'm not willing to, I don't have the energy to deal with the fallout of how that is perceived. So, we might think that that's the preserve of others or different people, or, you're not having people in roles like mine who need to rock to regulate. And it's like, that's just not true. It's just people aren't safe to do it. So I will always, again, contract, but for stimming and whatever movement, a lot of people have chronic pain conditions, so they need to walk. I will encourage people to do sessions lying down. They can do them in their bed if that's what they need to do. If they need to eat throughout, I don't have an issue with that. So it's all about like, how can we actually create those spaces for physically like all of that movement that needs to potentially happen. I will rein in, for want of a better term, my stimming in coaching sessions, just because it could be visually disorienting or disturbing. I never will use a noisy fidget or anything because I don't want that to impact on their environment, and I am creating an environment in service of the client, so I am thinking about that. So that's where I will adapt, but I feel quite comfortable adapting in that context. I don't feel comfortable that I have to adapt all my natural body movements. A lot of my chronic pain is down to having to hold in, and a bit like, sorry, was it Ruth? I think Ruth, you said yeah, makes you feel better. Stimming often happens for me, it's energy. It's like all this excess energy. It's like if I don't put it somewhere, my body holds onto it. It's stress, it's tension, and then it's pain. So actually releasing it is really, really positive. But also say it can be when I'm happy as well, or enthusiastic about something. So people often think, oh, it's about, feeling bad. So just because you see somebody stimming doesn't mean that they're feeling bad. They could be really enjoying that experience as well. Dermatillomania, I think I can guess what that is, but I don't actually know what that is, Emma. But yeah, I'm glad people feel they can actually stim, whether you're on camera or off camera during this session. Sebastian, you need to constantly chew something. Yeah, propping up with the chewing gum industry in Wales by yourself. Love that idea. I was so pleased when a student felt they could rock in a space I had set up. I know, I'm so grateful to anybody I ever see rocking, and I'm like in awe, because I'm like, I wish I could do that. So yes, and just the body language thing again. We are still being taught, like I'm still being taught in my apprenticeship, that if somebody is not looking directly at the screen, they're not interested. So can we just not think that I can, like I said, concentrate much better if I'm not looking directly at the screen? It's all a bit too confronting. So it's all that kind of body language stuff. We really need to get over some of the neuronormative expectations and interpretations around these things, because they're hugely, hugely unhelpful. And it's worth mentioning proprioception here, which is also one of our senses. Now, can I spell this in the chat? Proprioception. Proprioception is the sense of knowing where your body is in space. And I have really poor proprioception, so I constantly need to be pressing some of my body against objects as like a reassurance, because it's very disorienting if you can't fully tell where your body is in space. Escalators are a no-go for me. I literally think I'm upside down on them, but I know I'm not, but it feels that way to me. So again, some people might really need some input, and rocking can be partly to do with that, but people tapping things, hitting things, I'm always squeezing my hand, or just all these different things. So just knowing that these are like really natural responses to just different types of needs that people have. And the final part of this horizontal, well done everybody for making it this far. I applaud you. And I'll just really quickly look at Sebastian's comment. That's something I struggle with, actually. How do we adjust in sessions for contrasting needs? For example, I find leg twitching incredibly distracting and cannot concentrate at all. Yeah, visual periphery, get that as well. But at the same time, I need to be distraction free, and their need to stim are both really valid and important. So how do we find the middle? I usually try to turn away or just remove myself. It's hard when I'm the instructor. Yeah, so I heard about Dr. Nick Walker. I don't know if you know them, but they are like, yeah, just write the most amazing stuff about neuronormativity and being neurodivergent. And they talk about in lecture theatres, they really struggle with the tapping of keyboards. So there's a designated part of the lecture theatre that anybody who's taking notes on their laptop sits, which is furthest away from them, so that sound then is a bit diffused. One-on-one, it's obviously different, but I fundamentally believe if you can have those conversations with that person, you can collaboratively design a solution. And it's actually a really empowering thing to do as well, both for you as a facilitator or the coach, but also for those individuals as well, to go, oh God, I'm actually being asked about like my needs, and like, can we adapt? And now I'm kind of in a way being forced to think of a slightly different way to do it, but that's not necessarily bad, because I'm still being encouraged to do it. So I think there's loads of positive conversations actually to be had there. And hello to all my ADHDers out there who I think are going to maybe resonate with this. There's still some weird ideas around something like, if you do a practice for 8 weeks, it becomes a habit, and then it's like a habit forevermore and you don't have to think about it. I don't know what this is, because I have learned in the last few years that I don't have habits, I have routines and sequences. A habit, the definition, I think, of a habit is that you do it without thinking after a point. I would love that. There's not a thing I can do in my day that is done without thinking. So, for example, I have to take supplements at a certain time of every day with a certain drink. But the only way I can do that, I've been doing that for a couple of years now, I still do not just remember that somehow. So when I'm emptying the dishwasher, I have to take out the glass that I will only use for that specific drink, because that's my cue that that's to do with that drink, and put the supplements beside the kettle. Because one thing I will religiously do is at 11 o'clock normally every day is have the same cup of tea. So I will go to the kettle around then, I will see the glass, and then I'll suddenly go, oh, I meant to put orange juice in that. And then I put the orange juice and I go, why am I drinking orange juice? Oh, the supplements. Oh, right. So, but if one thing falls out of sequence, like my daughter has a meltdown in the morning and I don't empty the dishwasher, the supplements are not getting taken that day because the sequence didn't happen. There was no visual cue there for me to pick up on that. So this idea, I think, in coaching sometimes that we can, like establish habits with clients or get clients to shift their habits. I think probably if you're working with neurodivergent people, is a little bit misguided. And yeah, Marie, is the cup of tea not a habit? No, because I have to have other cues in place to tell me to have the cup of tea. I kind of did simplify there. I don't actually go, oh, it's 11 o'clock, it's time for my cup of tea. It's like I actually have another set of sequences in place to make that cup of tea happen. So yeah, it's kind of wild. Yeah, there's no such thing as a habit. There isn't for me. I personally don't see it that way. Helen, thank you for your comment that you may have already left. So I'm only at the beginning. I've got a bit of a dotted line around this thing on the slide because I don't fully understand my difference in habit forming and my need for sequences and visual cues. I do them, but I don't understand why they work or why I need them in that way and how to make them a bit more rigorous. So I certainly wouldn't be supporting other people to do that just yet because I can't explain it for myself. So I think I have a bit more research to do, a bit more kind of discussions with people and getting insight from maybe more experienced coaches in this space as well. So it's just flagging up that I don't really have a solution to offer you so much. I mean, I'm not really about offering you solutions, but I don't have some hack that I can give you to address this with clients. But I think it's just worth noting that we can't really just focus on changing habits or forming new habits because it just doesn't happen that way for a lot of people. Yeah, so Paul from the web, settled or regular tendency or practice, especially one that is hard to give up. Oh no, I just find it hard to make it happen. Like there's not anything that I find hard to give up because if they're not in my sequence, they don't exist basically. So yeah, that's a really interesting definition for it. Okay, so I applaud you all for sticking with me through so much. What I'm going to really quickly now do before we start to sort of finish up is look at the theoretical consideration. So if you remember, I had the diagonal with the 8 segments, and that's what we've gone through in the session. But I also had this, horizontals and verticals elude me, this vertical, which I think has about 6 or 7 things on it. And they're what I consider the theoretical considerations. For me, this is emerging, like it's very nascent. So I definitely don't feel knowledgeable enough to speak fully to all of this yet. I kind of think that'll come. I hope that will come. But what I will try and do is maybe just say a one-liner about each of these so you can get a sense of some of my thinking. I'll actually start weirdly on the third one down because it's got that little red dotted line from it. I should say this whole framework I've built on Miro. I don't know how many people use Miro, but visually mapping things I've realized is like my way of making sense of stuff and of learning. So that's why it all looks kind of like this. So that red dotted line is actually everything we've sort of looked at today. So a neurodivergent lens for behaviour and corresponding adjustments to approach. That's how I would frame what we have talked about today. So it is very much thinking about behaviour and interpretations of behaviour and how we actually adapt our understanding of that and then make space for those differences as well. But I've started the top, psychological safety. I mean, that one comment at the beginning of that webinar that set my heart rate over 140 beats per minute, like that's not a safe space for me. I've just been told that at the very beginning, that people like me who have different needs aren't actually going to be in any way, forget embraced, accommodated in that space. So I think my contracting focus is actually on creating psychological safety with individuals. I've linked to a model that I kind of like, David Rock, I think the SCARF model. I've linked to that in the resources so you can read a bit more about that. But actually the psychological safety and the next bit that I've written there, sharing as a tool to combat isolation and otherness. I've had whole discussions through my apprenticeship of how appropriate it is, not my words, how appropriate it might be to share about the fact I'm neurodivergent, that I'm autistic, ADHD, to share, and that my differences show up in these ways. How is that like ethically appropriate? Because this is meant to be a space for them, and surely they're going to get distracted by your needs and yada, yada, yada. I guess my focus has been predominantly working with disabled. I didn't say neurodivergent, I just looked for disabled colleagues. It turned out that the majority of them were neurodivergent, but having worked myself with neurodivergent coaches who shared generously in our first session their experiences being neurodivergent. We didn't spend the whole session talking about them, but they modeled for me a vulnerability that you then hope your client can join you in. So essentially what I'm saying is I don't just talk about me in that contracting session to make myself feel better. I'm also trying to say I'm going in assuming this is a safe space where I can share this. And I'm hoping that in modeling that, you will also see, I'm not going to force anybody, but you will also see that maybe you feel okay to share similarly as well. And the other thing I'll say is it can be difficult, late diagnosed, to find your people, to find your tribe, because not many people are open, particularly about being autistic. So for me, if somebody told me they were autistic, it was like the best thing that ever happened to me. I was like, oh my God, I found one in the wild. This is like so exciting. So I immediately didn't feel alone in my experience. And I thought, God, I'm not even maybe going to have to explain what it means to be autistic to them. They're just going to get some of that. So I would actually advocate for when working with neurodivergent clients, that sharing within boundaries of what is ethically appropriate, but there's a space for sharing within it. And that for me predominantly happens in that contracting session. And then I just sort of park back that, or maybe have to refer back to something. Oh, sorry, I'm taking so many notes. Do you remember I was saying my working memory isn't so great? I might refer back to it, but I don't make it the focus of future sessions. I'm just going to pick up on the chat. Miro, glad there's another fan out there. I recently saw a short video of the misinformation regarding ADHD meds being the entry gate to addiction. And as an ADHDer, I don't say I'm an ADHDer because I can't say that. I just say I'm autistic and ADHD. My mind can't reconcile that as one word, so I just separate out the two, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Saying that if it was the case, why do ADHDers systematically forget their meds if they don't have reminders, routines, etc.? If it was so addictive, we would probably think more about taking them. Yeah, and that's so true for me. Such a good point, actually, to combat that, isn't it? It's just a gateway drug, isn't it, to everything else. And I will say, like, for me, coming into a space like this where I don't know most of you, I don't have context actually for most of you. I don't even know necessarily what institutions you're aligned to. And there's a really, really difficult narrative around being neurodivergent out there at the moment, from RFK Jr. is going to cure me by September. Brilliant. I love that. We're going to track us all. I know I'm not in America, but I mean, if the British government has showed us anything, is that they seem to be watching very closely what's happening over there. the Labour government does not want to support disabled people financially in any way, shape or form. So coming into a space like this, I have to say, you know, I have to wonder how much do I have to win people over on the idea that like autism exists or doesn't need to be cured and stuff. So I think we should all be mindful when we're working with neurodivergent clients. It's not just like trauma from the past and how people perceived you. It's every day. Every day I read something where I'm like, I shouldn't exist. I can't function. I've nothing to add to society. I need a cure, whatever it is. And it's really, really damaging. You cannot read it, but you still see the headline. You still see some of the narrative around it. So it's worth saying, just extending that further compassion and grace. I mean, it's the same with trans rights, obviously, at the moment. It's like we need to actually be really thoughtful in how we work with and alongside people who identify as part of those groups, because it's not a fun time, I gotta say, to be around. So Maya, I'm sure Maya's gone, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. Boundaries are extremely difficult to build when a consistent presence of neurodivergence is sharing as a way of understanding. Oh, Ruth, yeah, such a good point. And I've had to really work on boundaries over the last few years, because oversharing, as exemplified probably by the session today, is I tried to turn it into a gift in these contexts. It's like I'm doing this in the hope that it builds shared understanding, but I don't always know when it's not safe to overshare. And that's quite scary, actually, sometimes. Sharing specific things can also be a form of validation and helping client to realize that it's also their experience, and that experience, that is a valid experience. Yeah, absolutely. Usually I try to always ask if they're okay for me to share something. Yeah, and I've always loved that when I've been in receipt of that as well. Important to embrace positives of neurodiversity. Do not need a cure. Yeah, thanks. I don't need to be cured, because I wouldn't be here if I was cured. So it'd be a bit problematic. And my daughter wouldn't be here either. So that would also be problematic. Also, being clear if you are sharing for them or for you. Exactly. So that's always my question. Is this in service of the client? If it is not in service of the client and it's just something I really want to talk about, I don't share it. So jumping back, sorry, we've gone psychological safety, we talked about sharing, we've looked at the kind of lens for interpreting behavior. The next thing I would say, validating negative experience and being mindful of positive spin. There's a lot of criticism in the autistic community about cognitive behavioral therapy, and obviously there's cognitive behavioral coaching as well, because there's some, and it's like misunderstandings, I think, in some sense, but it's this idea that your thoughts are misaligned or, you know, not accurate in a way, and you need to adjust them, and that's how you're going to kind of overcome and move on from this. And it's like, well, I sound really paranoid sometimes when I'm talking to other people, because if you are constantly getting communicated this subtle message, it could be on one topic or about your whole being, but nobody's saying it outright, but you've learned enough over years that, oh yeah, you're picking up those messages right. Like, you're not acceptable in this way, shape or form. You do have to adapt in order for those other people to be okay with you being in that space. Without being able to give really concrete examples, or if that just doesn't align with somebody's own experience, it's really hard for people to understand that that's real. That's not just my perception, that's real. I'm really being rejected or oppressed in those scenarios. It's not just some, paranoid delusion that I'm having. Even if it was, should we not attend to that as well? So I'm just very mindful that sometimes in coaching, we want to shift to the positive read of something, and we want to get the client there. And that's in good faith. We want to do that. We want them to be able to move on or work with that thing, but actually just bearing witness, I think, to the challenges that are being described, maybe acknowledging that you don't have that experience, but that sounds really difficult. That can be really powerful, rather than being told, oh, I'm sure they didn't mean it that way, which is what I repeatedly get told in my life. Focus on practical neurodivergent specific tools for navigating challenges. So there is a book that I've linked to in the resources section by Dr. Nancy Doyle, who founded Genius Within, if anybody knows that organisation. She's a psychologist, so it's got a very psychological kind of paradigm perspective within the book. I haven't read the whole book in full, disclaimer there, but I think if you're looking for, you know, somebody who's saying, oh, these frameworks or these theories are the ones that we find work best with neurodivergent clients, it'd be worth giving that book a look. I take a slightly different approach because I just don't think there are just set tools. I think it's about working with all tools in an affirming way. So I probably have a slightly different perspective, but I still think the book would be useful to have a look at. And I knew I said this somewhere, but finally, body mind. So Dr. Nick Walker, who I referenced earlier on, Dr. Nick Walker writes about the idea of the body mind, and it just speaks to that point I made about neuro referring to nerves or nervous system, not the brain. So being an autistic or ADHD is not an experience that exists within my brain. It's throughout my whole entire body, as referenced through proprioception, interoception, alexithymia, all of these things. So it's not just stuff that's happening in the confines of my skull. So I think if you're working with somebody who's neurodivergent, one of even the first things you could do to indicate a little bit of safety would be like, you know, physically, what do you need in sessions? Because it's quite likely physically they're going to need something or potentially need something a little bit different. Oh, just a nice thank you, Jenny. No problem at all. And I promise we are just coming to the end. So these are the resources. There's just 2 slides of them, and I always try to create a mix of videos. I don't think I actually have any podcasts on this one. Videos, blogs, what was I going to say? Journal articles. Sorry, completely lost my train of thought. Journal articles, books, whatever it might be. I've mentioned Dr. Nick Walker like a million times. I'm a complete fangirl for Nick Walker. And they talk a lot about post-normal possibilities. And if I could create a world for my daughter that was more welcoming of neurodivergent folks, it would be full of these post-normal possibilities. So if this is an area you're really interested in and you don't know Nick Walker's work, you need to know Nick Walker's work. And you can start with their book, Neuroqueer Heresies, which also has like the coolest name of a book ever, but also they've got lots of stuff available free online as well. I'm going to stop talking because we're just at time. There might be other questions. I'm happy to hang on a few more minutes. Yelena, I know you might need to go. Oh, which does that mean I can hang on? I'm not sure. But did you want to, Yelena, say about the next webinar session as well?
Thank you, Hannah. Take a moment to breathe. I know you've given us all you have here today, so thank you so much. As you can see in the comments and throughout and now, people really value and thank you for your vulnerability today. I can't thank all of you enough, Hannah especially, but all of you for engaging, sharing, and being here today. I've learned so much, and from the moment Hannah joined this network, I'm learning from Hannah, and I'm very grateful for that. I will put details, oops, now my link has changed, the details for the next webinar, which is on 15th of July, and hoping to see you there. If you have any questions, you can always get in touch with myself. If you have questions for Hannah, I'm sure you can go directly to her. A few of you joined the LinkedIn group today, so if you want to continue conversations there, if you want to talk and comment and ask questions, you're welcome. The platform is yours and you can use it however you want. So because it is only 2 minutes to an hour, I'm going to finish there and say thank you so much. Hannah is here for questions if you do have any. And I will provide a link for LinkedIn group, but I just want to say a huge thank you.
Yeah, and thank you to Yelena for setting up the network. I mean, it's the response tells you how much there's a need for something like this, and also for being super welcoming to this area of work as well. I'll pop in the chat the link too. So I'm chair of the neuro-affirming development subgroup, which is part of the network. We literally just had our first meeting the other week. It's going to evolve and emerge in a very neuro-affirming way, as in it might be slightly chaotic from my side and take some time for us to find our feet, but I'll put the link in the chat if anybody wants to. There's an expression of interest form if anybody wants to be part of that group. I think there's 19 of us currently. We just had 6 of us in our first meeting, which was actually nice and a nice size, a lovely size for a first meeting. And I'm really happy to connect on LinkedIn as well. I shout moan about some of this a fair bit on LinkedIn. So if you're interested in hearing more from me, that's a good way to do it as well. Always welcome kind of feedback and everything from people. And thanks for all your lovely comments as well in the session. I did promise I will put some homework questions. They're prompts, they're an invitation for you if you want to think about some of this stuff after the session. I will put them in the chat. It may not be today, but I promise that I will do that as soon as I can. But I'm happy to hang around until about 10 past if anybody wants to hang around and ask specific questions as well. But thank you. I really appreciate all of you showing up on a Friday, sunny Friday as well, and all your enthusiasm and engagement in the chat and on mic and everything as well. So it's been really brilliant.
Thank you, Hannah. Just a quick note that sometimes the chat is not available to everyone once we finish the event. So we will share the questions via email.
Great.
And we can also do in the LinkedIn group. So whatever platform you want to engage with. I'm hoping to see most of you at our next meeting on 26th and a next webinar by Laura Hogbing, who's actually, I think, here. Laura is here. So if you want to talk about apprenticeships and coaching in progress reviews, that will be our next topic. Thank you.